As with so many phrases that enter our personal or professional lives, risk assessment is frequently used, asked for, and communicated in various ways. But do we actually stop and think what the phrase actually means in the context that we're using it? Do we stop to think if the other person or people we're communicating the phrase to are understanding and interpreting it the same way as we are? Here's a relevant image. As the paths of life and work are littered with potential banana skins, risk assessments should be an integral part, a daily function of the practical delivering of whatever it is we do in our work, not just to be seen as an exercise in meeting regulatory requirements. It should be integrated into everything you do and think. Evaluating and controlling risks effectively will ensure that opportunities are not lost, will ensure that our competitive advantage is enhanced, depending on what field of work you're involved in. And it will ensure, by and large, that we'll spend less management time spent firefighting, constantly chasing our heels. Assessing and evaluating risk should be about having a framework. That's an important message. A framework is the way I've always thought through all the developments of my risk publications and tools and ideas, because it should be there as a framework to prompt and to guide you. It's not about trying to establish the definitive rulebook. That would actually spend more time restricting and constraining you. Positive risk taking is never constructively promoted when we're working within strictly defined parameters. The narrower our focus and our vision, the less easy it is to think about taking those risks. We need to focus on managing rather than eliminating risks. And if we take a low risk appetite, this is not really going to help the pursuit of high returns or beneficial outcomes that the concept of positive risk taking really tries to embrace. So if I'm thinking about a framework, within the framework, we need to be engaged in the problems or the risks. We don't ignore those. We also need to be aware of near misses, the things that nearly went wrong. But we also, within this framework, need to try to anticipate risks that have yet to even crystallize. So there's always going to be an element of risk assessment being about trying to anticipate the future. Don't get caught up in the term prediction too much. I'll come back to that. And also, you'll see a worksheet or a handout, PDF handout, associated with this module looking at the prediction conundrum. Anticipating what could be, what those risks may be. This is all about planning risk taking in reality. Ultimately, that's even supported by one of our UK government agencies. The National Audit Office, some years ago, back around 1999, they produced a report which again highly recognised the need for us to take risks, but where it is well conceived and well planned. That's the message. Risk has an upside as well as a downside, and we need to keep this very much in mind. The secret of mastering risk is to identify these, analyse them carefully, mitigate those downside risks as far as is convenient or economic or even possible. And then any of the remaining risks need to be monitored, controlled. We need contingency plans in place wherever possible. Should those risks occur, we feel reasonably confident we have some anticipated response that can kick in fairly quickly. If we do all of this methodically, we will increase the chances of success in any enterprise or field in which you work. And that's where risk assessment and evaluating information is going to be crucial. So let me give you a very detailed definition. You see on the screen here what risk assessment is, and I'll break it down into 3 different parts. Firstly, it's the gathering of information through processes of communication, investigation, observation, and persistence, and the analysis of potential outcomes of identified behaviours. It's about identifying specific risk factors of relevance to an individual and the circumstances in which they may occur. So if we go back to the first sentence there, it's about a range of activities that are common sense, good communicating. Persistence is all about vigilance and investigating and trying to draw in as much of the information as possible, as well as observing what's there in front of us and the connections of what's there in front of us. The second part, you'll see a counterbalance, identifying specific risk factors of relevance to the individual and the circumstances in which they occur. Now, risk factors will be the negatives, where risks have gone wrong. Examine the risk research and you'll find this is what it focuses its attention on. But here in my definition, we want to counterbalance those negative factors. So you'll see in the middle part of this definition, it's also about counterbalancing the negativity of your risk factors with the presence of protective factors. These you should think of as being the personal qualities or the resources in and around a person that help them to reduce or mitigate the potential for risk. So there's this counterbalance of risk factors on one side and protective factors on the other. Then there's a timescale issue. So you see towards the end of this definition, this process requires linking historical information to current circumstances in order to anticipate possible future change. And there's something else about timescale. From history to current to future. It also, in the last sentence, says that risk assessments should be distinguished separately from risk screening. The importance of language will crop up yet again. Risk screening will be an initial process of determining which risks require more detailed and thorough processes of assessment. So a risk screen is something with a series of prompts that we can do very quickly on relatively limited information. Whereas a risk assessment takes a lot more time. It's a lot more in depth. It's a lot fuller picture. But I emphasize again, it takes time. Those are 2 very important and distinctive tasks. The number of times that we're hearing the misuse of language, where's the risk assessment, as though this is the immediate thing you're going to do. The problem with the misuse of language, this then guides the kind of misuse of thinking to a certain extent. Here we have frequently used bureaucratic cliches. For many people, thinking of those of you, let's say, in practitioner roles, the power of risk assessment has been somewhat undermined by the, let's say, blandly repetitive cliches. And you'll see a few on the slide here. Where is the risk assessment? Have you done the risk assessment? Those in particular crop up once something's gone wrong. They'll be the first question that emerges as part of inquiry or scrutiny. Services linking with each other, saying, we cannot consider this referral until you provide us with a risk assessment. The danger that lies here in this mantra is that it kind of signifies more of an organisational, defensive, cover your back type of stance. I don't get a sense from these particular statements that we're talking here about progressive pursuit of best practice. Yes, risk assessment is a part of that progressive pursuit of best practice. But it's the tone in which some of these questions are asked and the situations in which they're asked that makes you wonder, where are people really genuinely coming from? For all of the good work you do, the problem, as you'll see at the bottom of the slide, is the greatest risk for many practitioners may now be not completing the risk assessment. The message might as well be, if you haven't ticked those boxes, well, you simply haven't been doing your job. And on your head be it. Well, here's an image that should stop us in our tracks regarding the mixed messages from those bureaucratic cliches. So what if you have ticked all the boxes? It doesn't necessarily mean that you've evaluated or managed the risk in any way. And here's a pair of eyes looking straight at you, saying, okay, well done. You've ticked your boxes, but just look at the state I'm still ending up in. So as I draw this particular brief presentation about what risk assessment is, as I draw that to a close, a couple of points that I'd like you to pick up on. You'll check in the resources, you'll see a PDF handout entitled The Prediction Conundrum. And when we're talking about predicting the future and take a read of that and relate the messages that you read to not just what's here, but also has been mentioned in the previous videos about the traps, the dangers of getting caught up in predictive risk assessment. Then I'd also like you to check out the PDF worksheet, Assessing and Managing Risk. It's all about keeping it simple. There's a series of prompts there which guide us through a very simple assessment of risk and a simple management plan. I'll ask you to try and apply each of those steps in that worksheet to a current situation, a current decision that you're presently working with.